You built what on my property? The woman's voice cut through the October air like a blade. I didn't look up from my welding torch. Sparks rained down on the steel frame of the bridge I was building, each one a small constellation falling to the dirt below. My bridge. My land. My dirt. The same dirt my grandfather bought with calloused hands in 1952. I killed the torch and lifted my mask. She stood there in her pressed blazer, arms crossed, flanked by 2 security guards who looked just as confused as they should be. This was going to be a problem. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from today. My name is Fletcher Granger, and I've been a welder for 30 years. I know steel the way some men know scripture, how it bends, how it reacts to heat, how it holds when treated right. That October afternoon, I was building a simple bridge, 5 meters long, 3 meters wide, steel frame with concrete decking, crossing the creek my grandfather used to fish in. The same was full of possibility 70 years ago. The old bridge had finally given up after last month's storm. The wood had rotted through in places I should have fixed years ago, and when the water came up fast and angry, it took half the structure with it. I'd been using the long way around for 3 weeks, adding 10 minutes to every trip in and out. 10 minutes doesn't sound like much until you're doing it twice a day, every day on your own land. So, I did what my grandfather would have done. I got my tools, bought the materials, and built a new bridge. I'd been working on it for 2 weeks. The foundation posts were sunk deep into bedrock on both sides of the creek. The steel frame was nearly complete. I was running a bead along the main crossbeam when I heard the car door slam. Then came that voice, sharp and certain, demanding to know what I'd built on her property. I set down my torch and turned around slowly. The woman standing at the edge of my work site wore a navy blazer over a white blouse, her hair pulled back, so tight it looked painful. Her name was Ramona Fairchild, though I didn't know it yet. Behind her stood 2 men in uniforms with Valley Security stitched on the breast pocket. She introduced herself as the president of the Oak Valley Meadows Homeowners Association and informed me that I was in violation of community construction guidelines. I let her finish before I spoke. This was private property, had been since 1952, and I had every legal right to build on my own land. Her smile didn't reach her eyes as she pulled out a document from her leather folder. It was titled HOA Amendment 2023. According to her, it designated this road and this creek crossing as a common area subject to HOA management and fees. I looked at the paper. It was printed on official-looking letterhead with the HOA logo at the top. The language was dense, full of whereas and heretofore, the kind of words designed to make regular people feel stupid. But I'm not a stupid man. I'm a welder who reads his contracts and keeps his paperwork in order. I'd never seen this amendment before, which made sense, because I wasn't a member of her HOA. My property sat outside the development boundaries. Always had. Her tone sharpened. She said I owed $250 in annual road maintenance fees, plus $1,500 in unauthorized construction penalties. She said it like she was doing me a favor by letting me know. I asked for proof that my land was now somehow part of her association. According to her, the amendment was all the proof anyone needed. I told her I needed documentation showing when and how my property deed had changed. Fairchild replied, "That's not how it works." I disagreed. That was exactly how it worked. The conversation went in circles for another 5 minutes before she handed me a formal notice and left. The 2 security guards looked uncomfortable the whole time, like they knew this wasn't right but weren't about to argue with the woman who signed their paychecks. After they drove off, I stood there holding that notice in my dirty work gloves, watching the dust settle back onto the road, my road. The same road my grandfather had cut through these woods with a borrowed bulldozer and 2 weeks of backbreaking labor. I went inside and pulled out the old filing cabinet. The manila envelope held the deed, yellow with age but clearly legible. Property boundaries and easement rights explicitly stated. Private road from Lot 47 to County Road 12, maintained by owner. Everything in black and white, notarized and recorded in 1952. I made copies that night. Then I called my daughter, Sloan, a sharp civil rights attorney. I told her what happened and sent pictures of the notice along with my deed copies. After a few moments of typing, she told me to hold tight and not sign anything. She'd review the HOA amendment and call back in the morning. Her familiar edge told me she was already planning 3 steps ahead. I didn't sleep well that night, not because I was worried exactly. I've been through enough in 55 years to know that most problems have solutions if you're patient and thorough. But there was something about the way Fairchild had looked at my bridge, at my land, like it was already hers, and I was just some squatter who hadn't figured it out yet. That look bothered me more than the threats, the fees, or the fake amendment. It was the look of someone who believed their authority was absolute and their word was law. Around midnight, I got up and walked out to the bridge. The moon was almost full, bright enough to see by. The steel frame cast long shadows across the creek. I ran my hand along one of the welds, feeling the smooth bead where two pieces of metal had become one. Good work. Honest work. The kind of work that lasts. In the same spot 70 years ago, someone had built a road through wilderness with borrowed equipment and determination. That history mattered. That's when I saw it, a flashlight beam moving near the bridge, down by the creek bank. I stayed quiet and watched. Two figures, both carrying clipboards, taking pictures and measurements. I recognized one of them, one of the security guards from earlier. They were there for maybe 10 minutes before getting back in their vehicle and driving off, never realizing I'd been watching. I went back inside and wrote down everything I'd seen, the time, the vehicle description, what they'd been doing. Sloan had taught me that years ago. Document everything. Assume nothing, trust the facts. I put the note in the filing cabinet with my deed and went back to bed. This time I slept fine, because now I knew this wasn't just about fees or permits. This was about something bigger. And if Ramona Fairchild wanted to play games with my land, with my family's history, then she was about to learn something important. You don't win fights by shouting the loudest. You win them by being right and proving it. I woke up to the sound of metal scraping against metal. It was 6 a.m, too early for construction noise, especially on my own property. I pulled on my boots and walked outside. What I saw made my blood run cold in a way that had nothing to do with the October chill. Someone had installed a steel gate across my road. Not a small gate, a full security gate, the kind you see at gated communities, 8 feet tall, with spikes along the top. It sat maybe 20 yards from my bridge, blocking the only route from my house to the county road. A sign hung from the crossbar. HOA property. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. I walked up to it slowly, running my hand along the posts. Fresh concrete at the base, still damp. They'd done this in the dark, probably right after I'd gone back inside last night. Professional work, too. This wasn't some temporary barrier. This was meant to be permanent. I heard a car engine and turned around. Ramona Fairchild's black sedan pulled up on the other side of the gate. She stepped out, wearing another blazer, this one charcoal gray, and that same tight smile from yesterday. The two security guards flanked her again, though they had the decency to look uncomfortable. Fairchild walked right up to the gate like she owned it, which, according to her version of reality, she did. "Good morning, Mr. Granger," she said. "I see you've noticed our new security installation. Just a reminder that this road falls under HOA jurisdiction per Amendment 2023. You'll need to submit payment for the annual maintenance fee of $250, plus the $1,500 construction violation fine, before we can issue you an access code." I didn't raise my voice. "Do you have documentation proving this road is HOA property?" She pulled out the same amendment from yesterday. I said, "I'd like to see the original recorded document with the county, along with proof of when my deed was modified." Her expression didn't change. "The amendment is filed with our HOA records. That's sufficient documentation." I shook my head. "It's not. My property deed from 1952 explicitly grants me private easement rights. Unless you can show me a legally recorded change to that deed, this gate is illegal." Fairchild's smile faded. "Mr. Granger, I understand you're upset about the fees, but that doesn't give you the right to ignore community regulations. We have a responsibility to maintain safety and property values for all residents. Your unauthorized construction puts everyone at risk." I pointed at the bridge. That bridge was inspected by county engineers. It meets every safety standard. I have the paperwork. Her tone hardened. "Then you won't mind showing that paperwork to our HOA board at next week's meeting. Until this matter is resolved, this gate stays locked." She handed me a business card through the bars. "My office hours are 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. We can discuss payment arrangements whenever you're ready." Then she got back in her car and drove away. The security guards lingered for a moment. One of them, younger than the other, wouldn't meet my eyes. The older one finally spoke. "For what it's worth, sir, we're just doing what we're told." I nodded. "I know. But you might want to ask yourself who's telling you what to do, and whether they have the legal right to do it." After they left, I stared at the gate blocking my path. Reaching my house now meant a 5-kilometer detour on county roads. I grabbed my phone and called Sloan, noting how much effort someone had put into asserting authority over land that wasn't theirs. She answered on the second ring. I told her about the gate. I heard her inhale sharply. "They did what?" I repeated it. She was quiet for a moment, then her voice came back sharp and focused. "Dad, listen to me. Do not cut that gate. Do not damage it. Don't give them any reason to claim you're the aggressor here. Take pictures of everything: the gate, the sign, the concrete foundation. Document what time it was installed. Get witness statements if anyone saw it happen. I'm driving down there today." I spent the next hour photographing the gate from every angle: the posts, the lock mechanism, the fresh concrete, the sign. I measured the distance from my property line. The gate sat squarely on land that had been deeded to my family for 72 years. I walked back to my workshop and pulled out the survey map from 1952. The property boundaries were crystal clear. This gate was 30 feet inside my legal easement. Sloan arrived around noon, her sedan packed with file boxes and a laptop case. She walked straight to the gate, studied it for a long moment, then pulled out her phone and started taking her own pictures. We went inside and spread everything across the kitchen table: my original deed, the survey map, the county easement records, and the HOA amendment Fairchild had given me. Sloan read through the amendment twice, then looked up at me. "Dad, this document has no notary seal, no county recording stamp, no official filing number. It's just a printed paper with a logo on it." I leaned back in my chair. "So it's fake?" She held up a hand. "Not necessarily fake. It might be an internal HOA document, but it has zero legal weight over your property deed. Your deed is recorded with the county. It's been recorded for 7 decades. An HOA can't just declare eminent domain over private land because they printed a fancy document." I asked her what our next move was. She pulled out her laptop. "First, I'm checking the county records to see if there's any legitimate claim here. Second, I'm pulling the HOA's incorporation documents to see what their actual jurisdiction is. Third, we're filing a formal complaint about this gate." She worked for 3 hours, clicking through databases and making phone calls. Finally, she turned the laptop around to show me. "Look at this. This is the Oak Valley Meadows HOA boundary map from when they incorporated in 2018. She zoomed in. "Your property is marked as Lot 47, excluded from HOA jurisdiction. It says it right here in their own filing documents. They knew your land wasn't part of their association. They've always known. So why are they doing this?" I asked. Sloan pulled up another document. "This is their financial report from last year. They've been running a deficit. They increased fees twice and residents complained. My guess: Fairchild is looking for new revenue streams. If she can claim jurisdiction over adjacent properties, she can charge them fees. It's a cash grab, dressed up in legal language." I thought about that for a moment. "So what do we do?" She closed the laptop. "We fight back, legally, methodically, and with every piece of documentation we can find. I'm calling a property attorney I know. We're going to make them regret putting up that gate." That night, I tried to drive home the usual way and had to turn around at the gate. I sat there in my truck for a minute, staring at that steel barrier with its threatening sign. Then I drove the long way, 5 extra kilometers, past houses I didn't know, on roads that weren't mine. When I finally pulled into my driveway, it was dark. I could see my bridge in the distance, solid and real, built with my own hands on my own land. And I thought about what Sloan had said: fight back legally, methodically, with documentation. That was the right way, the only way, but it didn't make the anger any less real. The post appeared on social media 3 days after the gate went up. I don't spend much time online, but my neighbor called that morning and told me I should probably take a look. I borrowed my daughter's laptop and found it on the Oak Valley Meadows community page. She tagged it with phrases like illegal construction and dangerous bridge, the kind of words designed to make people afraid before they knew the facts. The comment section filled up fast. Most people I didn't recognize, probably residents from the newer development who'd never met me. Some demanded action. Others shared the post with angry reactions. A few asked reasonable questions about whether I'd actually broken any laws, but those got buried under the noise. One comment stood out. "This is exactly why we have HOA rules. People think they can do whatever they want, and the rest of us have to deal with the consequences." That one had 43 likes. My daughter saw the post around the same time I did. She called immediately, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Dad, do not respond to this online. Do not engage. She's baiting you into a public fight where she controls the narrative." I asked what I should do instead. She already had it figured out. We document the post. Screenshot everything. Then we prepare a formal response with facts and evidence, but not on social media. We do this the right way. That afternoon, I drove to the hardware store in town to pick up materials for another project. The owner, a man I'd known for 15 years, didn't make eye contact when I walked in. I found what I needed and brought it to the counter. He rang it up in silence. When I handed him my card, he finally spoke. "Fletcher, I don't know what's going on with you and the HOA, but people are talking." I told him people should talk to me directly if they had questions. He nodded but didn't say anything else. I left with my materials and a clear sense that something had shifted in how people saw me. The HOA called an emergency meeting for that Thursday evening. I received a formal notice in my mailbox, hand-delivered, requesting my attendance to address the violations and discuss community concerns. The meeting was scheduled at the community center at 7 o'clock. Mandatory attendance for all HOA members was printed at the bottom, along with a line that said, "Concerned adjacent property owners are welcome." That last part was meant for me. My daughter drove down again for the meeting. We arrived 10 minutes early. The community center was already half full, maybe 60 people scattered across rows of folding chairs. Most of them I'd never seen before. A few I recognized from the old days, before the development went up, but they didn't wave or acknowledge me. We sat in the back. The HOA president stood at the front with a microphone and a projector screen, looking composed and professional in her navy blazer. She called the meeting to order at exactly 7. First on the agenda was the unauthorized construction issue, which she presented like a prosecutor laying out a case. She displayed the same photos from social media on the big screen, each one carefully chosen to emphasize shadows and angles that made my bridge look dangerous. She explained that I had refused to cooperate with HOA safety protocols, mentioned the unpaid fees, and talked about community standards and the importance of maintaining property values for all residents. Her voice never rose. She didn't need to. The facts, as she presented them, sounded official enough to convince anyone who wasn't paying attention. When she finished, she opened the floor for questions. A woman in the third row raised her hand. "What kind of structure are we talking about here? Is it really dangerous?" The HOA president nodded gravely. "Without proper engineering oversight and permits, any bridge poses potential liability. If someone were to use that bridge and get injured, it could affect our entire community's insurance rates." The woman looked worried. Another hand went up. "Why didn't he just get the proper permits in the first place?" Fairchild's expression turned sympathetic. "That's an excellent question. Unfortunately, some people believe rules don't apply to them." I felt my daughter's hand on my arm, a gentle pressure that said stay calm. But I couldn't sit there and listen to lies without responding. I stood up. The room went silent. The HOA president's smile didn't waver. "Mr. Granger, do you have something you'd like to share?" I did. I told them this was private property that had been in my family since 1952. I explained that I had documentation proving my easement rights. I mentioned that the bridge had been inspected and approved by county engineers. I kept my voice level and my facts clear. The president listened with an expression of patient concern. "I appreciate your perspective, Mr. Granger, but the HOA amendment of 2023 clearly designates that access road as a common area. We have documentation as well." I asked her to show the room that documentation, specifically the county recording stamp that would make it legally binding. Her smile tightened. "That's not how HOA governance works. Our internal bylaws don't require county approval." I told her that property deeds absolutely required county recording. She cut me off smoothly. I think we're getting into legal territory that's better handled through proper channels. Let's move on to the next agenda item. But the damage was done. Not to her, to me. I could see it in the faces around the room. Some people looked uncertain, like they didn't know who to believe. Others looked convinced that I was the problem, the difficult neighbor who couldn't follow simple rules. A few looked annoyed that I disrupted their evening with my selfishness. The president had framed it perfectly. She was the calm authority trying to maintain order, and I was the stubborn old man causing trouble. We stayed until the end, but it was clear nothing would change. When the meeting ended, most people filed out without looking at me. A few gave small, sympathetic nods, but didn't approach. One woman I didn't recognize walked past and muttered loud enough for me to hear. Some people just don't respect community values. My daughter's jaw was clenched tight. We walked to the parking lot in silence. On the drive back, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger, not frustration. Isolation. The HOA president had done in 1 hour what takes most people weeks. She'd turned neighbors into strangers, and strangers into a jury. She'd made me the villain in a story where I was supposed to be the victim. And she'd done it all with a smile, a microphone, and carefully chosen words that sounded reasonable if you didn't know the truth. My daughter broke the silence. Dad, we need to understand what we're up against here. This isn't just about the gate or the fees. She's building a public case against you, so that when this goes to court, she can claim community support. She's isolating you, so you'll give up. I looked out the window at the dark road and said quietly, I'm not giving up. Sloan nodded. I know, but we need to be smarter. We need evidence they can't dispute and allies they can't intimidate. That night, my phone rang around 10. It was an older woman's voice, shaky but determined. She said her name was Darlene, and that she used to be the HOA treasurer before the current president took over. She said she knew the truth about what was happening. She had documents, but she was scared. The president had threatened her when she questioned some financial irregularities last year. She'd stayed quiet to protect herself, but watching what happened to me at that meeting had changed her mind. She asked if we could meet somewhere private. I told her yes. She said she'd call back with a time and place, then hung up. I sat in my kitchen with the lights off, thinking about that phone call, about the meeting, the gate, the social media post, and the careful way the HOA president had painted me as the enemy. My daughter was right. This was bigger than property rights. This was about power, control, and someone who'd learned that the best way to take what isn't yours is to make everyone believe it was yours all along. But now, we had something we hadn't had before, someone on the inside. Someone who knew where the bodies were buried. That changed everything. The former treasurer met us at a diner 30 minutes outside of town. She'd chosen the location herself, arriving 20 minutes early to make sure no one from the community had followed her. When my daughter and I walked in, she was sitting in the back booth with a large canvas bag at her feet and a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Her hands trembled slightly when she shook mine. She looked like someone who'd been carrying a heavy secret for too long and was finally ready to put it down. She didn't waste time. I have emails, financial records, meeting notes from before I was forced out, she said. The current president has been running the HOA like her personal bank account for 2 years. She pulled a USB drive from her purse and slid it across the table. Everything's on here, dates, amounts, vendors that don't exist. She set up a security company owned by her husband and funneled $50,000 to it last year alone. The board approved it because she told them it was necessary for community safety. Most of them don't even read the financial reports. My daughter picked up the drive carefully like it might break. Why are you giving this to us now? She asked. The older woman's voice steadied. Because what she's doing to you, she did to me. When I questioned a payment that didn't make sense, she called a special meeting and had me removed as treasurer. She told everyone I was financially incompetent. She made people believe I couldn't handle basic accounting. I've been doing accounting for 40 years. She destroyed my reputation in one night because I asked the wrong questions. Darlene opened the canvas bag and pulled out a 3-inch binder. These are copies of everything, board meeting minutes showing she pushed through that amendment without proper voting procedures, construction fines she collected from other residents that never made it into the official budget. She even charged your bridge violation fine in the last quarterly report, $1,500 marked as collected even though you never paid it. My daughter started taking notes as the older woman continued. She's been expanding HOA authority gradually, testing how far she can push before anyone pushes back. Your property was the next target because it's valuable and you're not part of the association. She figured you'd be isolated and easy to pressure. We spent 2 hours in that diner going through the documents. The USB drive contained over 300 emails spanning 18 months. Many of them showed the HOA president discussing ways to increase revenue by extending jurisdiction over adjacent properties. One email to the board was particularly clear. We have an opportunity to expand our management area to include the access roads that border our development. This will provide additional fee income and give us greater control over the aesthetics and safety of our entire neighborhood. Another email mentioned me specifically. The Granger property presents an ideal test case. He's elderly, lives alone, and unlikely to mount serious legal opposition. My daughter photographed every page of the binder with her phone. Darlene walked us through the timeline of how the president had consolidated her power, first replacing board members who questioned her, then rewriting bylaws to give herself more unilateral authority, and finally creating violations and issuing fines to manufacture legitimacy while generating income. The gate across my road was her boldest move yet, but it fit the same pattern of escalating control. I asked about the amendment she kept citing. Darlene shook her head. That document was never properly voted on. She drafted it herself, presented it at a meeting where half the board didn't show up, and declared it passed by unanimous consent. There's no record of an actual vote. It's not filed with the county because it's not a legal document. It's just something she printed to make her authority look official. My daughter added that to her notes. She'd been right from the start. The amendment was worthless. Before we left, the older woman grabbed my arm. "Be careful," she said. "She's not going to back down easily. She's invested too much in this image of herself as the person who brought order and standards to the community. If you expose her, she'll fight dirty." I told her we'd already seen that. She shook her head. "You haven't seen the worst of it yet. When she feels cornered, she gets vicious. Just document everything and don't give her any ammunition." We drove back with the USB drive and copies of the binder locked in my daughter's briefcase. She'd already called the property attorney she knew, a specialist in land disputes who'd handled cases against overreaching HOAs before. We had an appointment for Monday morning. My daughter spent the rest of the weekend building a timeline, cross-referencing emails with financial records, highlighting every contradiction and every lie. By Sunday night, she had a file 200 pages thick, full of tabs, notes, and a clear narrative of systematic abuse of authority. I looked at that file and thought about the meeting where I'd been made to look like the problem, the social media posts that had turned neighbors against me, and realized the real story was finally starting to come into focus. The gate that forced me to drive miles out of my way every day. All of it had been calculated, all of it part of a pattern. But now we had proof. Not just my word against hers, not just old deeds and property maps. We had her own words, her own emails, her own financial records showing exactly what she'd been doing and why. We had everything we needed to take her down. The only question was whether the system would care enough to do something about it. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later at the county courthouse. My daughter had filed an emergency injunction requesting immediate removal of the gate and a restraining order against further HOA interference with my property rights. The judge assigned to the case had a reputation for not tolerating nonsense, which, according to our attorney, was exactly what we needed. The hearing was open to the public, and my daughter had sent notices to every Oak Valley resident whose email she could find. If the HOA president wanted this fight in front of the community, we'd give her the stage she'd built. The courtroom was more crowded than I expected. My daughter and I sat at the plaintiff's table with our attorney, a man in his 60s who had spent 3 decades fighting property disputes and carried the quiet confidence of someone who knew the law like second nature. Across the aisle sat the HOA president, Ramona Fairchild, with her own attorney, a sharp-dressed woman whose face stayed unreadable. Behind us, the gallery was packed. I recognized Arlene, the former treasurer, sitting 3 rows back. Several Oak Valley residents I'd seen at the community meeting had come too. Even a local reporter was scribbling notes. When the judge entered, we all rose. She was a black woman in her 50s with silver streaks in her hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen every excuse known to man. She sat down, reviewed the file in front of her, and spoke plainly. This is a hearing on an emergency motion regarding property access and alleged HOA overreach. Counselor, you may begin. Our attorney stood and presented our case calmly and methodically, no theatrics, just facts. My property deed from 1952, clearly stating my recorded easement rights. The HOA's own incorporation boundary map, showing my land was excluded from their jurisdiction. He laid out how the gate had been installed without legal authority and how the HOA had demanded fees it had no right to collect. He kept it simple: documents, dates, and the law. When he finished, the judge turned to the HOA's side. Your response? The defense attorney stood smoothly. Your Honor, the HOA acted in good faith to protect community safety. The plaintiff constructed a bridge without HOA approval, which under our Amendment 2023 requires review and permitting. The gate was installed to prevent potential liability until this matter could be properly resolved. Our client has repeatedly tried to work with Mr. Granger, but he has refused to cooperate. The judge peered over her reading glasses. Do you have documentation showing this amendment was legally recorded and applies to property outside your HOA boundaries? The attorney hesitated. The amendment is part of our internal governance documents, Your Honor. It was properly adopted by our board. The judge's voice remained even. That wasn't my question. Do you have proof that this amendment has legal authority over private property not within your jurisdiction? The attorney opened her mouth, closed it again, then tried to pivot. We believe the access road in question serves the broader community and therefore falls under reasonable HOA management. Our attorney rose again. Your Honor, if I may present additional evidence. The judge nodded. He clicked to the first slide on the courtroom projector, an email from the USB drive. This is an internal message from the HOA president to her board, discussing strategies to expand jurisdiction over adjacent properties for revenue purposes. He read the line aloud. We have an opportunity to expand our management area to include access roads that border our development. This will provide additional fee income. The courtroom fell silent. Then he displayed another email. This one mentions my client specifically. The Granger property presents an ideal test case. He's elderly, lives alone, and unlikely to mount serious legal opposition. There was a low murmur from the gallery. The judge lifted her hand. Order! The HOA's attorney quickly stood. Your Honor, these emails were obtained without authorization and may violate attorney-client privilege. Our attorney didn't miss a beat. These were provided by a former HOA officer who had lawful access to HOA records during her tenure. There's no privilege. They're internal business communications, not legal counsel. The judge studied the emails for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Continue. Our attorney then presented the financial records, a $50,000 annual contract with Valley Security LLC, registered to the president's husband, with no competitive bidding or oversight. He showed the fines ledger listing my $1,500 construction penalty as collected despite no payment ever being made. Each exhibit built a tighter case of misconduct and greed. When the HOA attorney tried to interject, Your Honor, these financial issues are unrelated to property access, the judge cut her off sharply. They go directly to motive and credibility, Counselor. Sit down. The woman obeyed. Next came the meeting minutes, proving the so-called amendment had been pushed through without quorum or vote, and the absence of any county recording to make it legally binding. The county engineer's report confirming my bridge's safety sealed the picture. Their entire claim was built on fiction. When our attorney rested, the judge turned her gaze on Fairchild. Ma'am, would you like to explain these emails? Fairchild stood, her voice strained but defiant. Your Honor, those messages are being taken out of context. We were discussing legitimate ways to fund community improvements. The reference to Mr. Granger was merely an assessment of potential legal exposure, not targeting. The judge's tone didn't soften. And the security company, owned by your husband? Fairchild's face reddened. That's coincidental. Valley Security provided the best bid. The judge leaned forward. Was there a competitive bidding process? Fairchild paused. We evaluated several options. The judge's eyes narrowed. That's not what I asked. Silence fell so thick you could hear the courtroom clock ticking. Then the judge closed the file folder in front of her. I've heard enough. She looked at both attorneys. Based on the evidence presented, this court finds that the HOA has no legal jurisdiction over the plaintiff's property. The gate was installed without authority on private land. The fees demanded have no legal basis. I am issuing an immediate injunction requiring the removal of the gate within 48 hours. Furthermore, I am ordering an independent audit of HOA finances and forwarding this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of potential fraud and misappropriation of funds. The room erupted into whispers. The judge struck her gavel once. The formal hearing on all claims will proceed next week, but the emergency relief is granted effective immediately. The gate comes down. Mr. Granger's property rights are restored, and this HOA will submit to financial oversight until this matter is fully resolved. We're adjourned. The judge stood, gathered her papers, and walked out. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the empty bench, trying to process what had happened. My daughter squeezed my shoulder, whispering, "You did it, Dad." Across the aisle, the HOA president was already heading for the exit, her attorney close behind, both avoiding eye contact with anyone in the room. In the hallway, Darlene, the former treasurer, caught up to us, her eyes glistening. "Thank you for doing this," she said softly. She would have kept going if someone hadn't stopped her. Other residents began to gather nearby, hesitant at first. One man apologized for believing the social media lies. Another woman asked how she could get copies of the financial records. For the first time in months, people were starting to see the truth, to see what had been hidden behind polished words and false authority. Outside the courthouse, the reporter from the preliminary hearing stopped me on the steps. "Any comment on the judge's ruling?" she asked. I kept it simple. The law worked the way it's supposed to. That's all there is to say. The full hearing came exactly 1 week later. This time, the courtroom was even more crowded. Word had spread through Oak Valley about what had been exposed. Residents who had ignored me at the community meeting now showed up, demanding answers. The local newspaper had run a front-page story, HOA president accused of financial misconduct. The reporter had done her homework, pulling records, interviewing former board members who'd been pushed out, piecing together the story we'd lived through. The narrative had shifted, and everyone wanted to see how it ended. The same judge presided, looking sharper than ever, like she'd spent the week reading every word of a case file. Our attorney had submitted 80 new pages of evidence, including testimony from 3 other property owners who'd been targeted with bogus fines and inflated fees. The HOA had replaced its legal counsel. Their new attorney, a gray-haired man with the weary posture of someone hired to clean up someone else's mess, stood quietly beside Fairchild. His job wasn't to win. It was to minimize the damage. That told me all I needed to know. The judge called the court to order and asked for opening statements. Our attorney stood first. "Your Honor, this case is about property rights and abuse of authority. The evidence will show a deliberate pattern of overreach designed to extract money from residents and non-residents alike, while personally enriching the HOA president through fraudulent contracts. The facts will speak for themselves." He sat. The defense attorney rose, tugging at his cufflinks. "Your Honor, while there may have been administrative irregularities, the HOA acted in what it believed was the community's best interest. We are prepared to cooperate with the court to improve oversight moving forward." The judge made a note but said nothing. Then it was our turn. My daughter took the stand first. Calm, composed, methodical. She explained every document: the property deed, the easement rights, the county survey, the incorporation papers excluding my land, the timeline of escalating harassment. Her voice never wavered, even when the defense tried to rattle her. "Isn't it true," they asked, "that your father never attended HOA meetings or communicated with the board before this?" She answered evenly, "He wasn't required to. He's not a member of the HOA. His property was explicitly excluded when they incorporated." The attorney tried again. "Wouldn't good neighborly conduct include working within the community framework?" Sloan didn't miss a beat. Good neighborly conduct doesn't include installing gates on someone else's land and demanding payment for imaginary violations. The judge's approving nod said everything. Then it was my turn. I swore in and sat down, the room full of eyes on me. I talked about my grandfather buying the land in 1952, about the old bridge that washed out in the storm, about why I built the new one, not for profit, not for pride, but because it was needed. I described the morning spent welding steel in the cold October air, and how it felt to find a gate blocking my own road. When my attorney asked how it had affected me, I told the truth, about the 5 kilometers I had to drive each way, about the time lost, the frustration, and the deeper wound of being treated like a trespasser on my own soil. The defense attorney's cross-examination was polite, almost resigned. "Mr. Granger," he asked, "would you ever consider joining the HOA voluntarily?" I said no, because my land isn't part of their development, and I don't need someone else's permission to live on what's mine. He asked if I understood why they might be concerned about construction near their community. "Concern is fine," I said. "Control is not. And this was never about safety, it was about money." He didn't press further. He didn't need to. The final witness was the independent auditor, the one the judge had appointed. A CPA with 30 years' experience, he'd spent the week combing through the HOA's finances. His testimony was cold, factual, devastating. He found multiple payments to the security company owned by the president's husband, with no documentation of services rendered. He found fines marked as collected that were never deposited. He found meeting minutes altered to show approval for expenses that had never been voted on. In total, he identified over $90,000 in questionable transactions across 3 years. The room went still. When the judge asked if the defense wanted to call witnesses, their attorney stood slowly. "Your Honor," he said, "in light of the evidence, our client would like to address the court directly." The judge nodded. Fairchild stood, her voice trembling for the first time since this all began. Water never argues. It just moves forward, finding its path. My daughter called around 8. She'd been talking to our attorney about the damages award and said the HOA's insurance would cover it. 3 residents had already asked her to review their own disputes with the previous board. She sounded tired but content. We'd done what we set out to do, prove the truth, held someone accountable, reminded people that fairness still existed if you were willing to dig for it. Before we hung up, she asked how I felt. I told her I was fine. She pressed gently. "No, really, how are you feeling?" I thought about it. Relieved, I guess. Not happy exactly, but relieved it's over. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "It's okay to be angry, Dad. What she did was wrong. You're allowed to feel that." I smiled. "I've been angry. But anger doesn't build anything. It just burns. What I feel now is something better. A kind of peace. Because justice, when you finally find it, doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be real." That night, for the first time in months, I slept soundly. No gate blocking my road. No threats hanging over me. No lies spreading through a community that never really knew me. Just my house, my land, my bridge, and the quiet certainty that some things, once set right, stay that way. When morning came, I brewed coffee and stepped outside. The air was cool, clean. I walked down the path to check on the grass, seed I'd planted the day before. Tiny green shoots were already breaking through the soil, reaching toward the light. It would take a few weeks to grow in, but you could already see the promise of it. Tiny green shoots breaking through the disturbed soil, covering the scars with new life. A car drove past on the county road, and the driver waved. I waved back, not knowing if they were someone who'd supported me, opposed me, or never cared either way. It didn't matter anymore. The gate was gone, the road was open, and life could return to the quiet rhythm it was meant to have, the rhythm of seasons and weather and honest work, not the artificial drama of manufactured authority and invented violations. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. 6 months passed before I decided to put up the sign. The criminal case had ended as expected. $50,000 in fines, 2 years of probation, and a permanent ban from HOA leadership for the former president. Her husband's security company was quietly dissolved, its contracts canceled and registration revoked. The new HOA board, led by the former treasurer, implemented transparent financial practices and annual external audits. Residents who'd been wrongly fined received refunds. The community was healing, slowly, the way trust rebuilds after it's been broken. In March, I received a formal letter of apology from the new board. Professionally written, acknowledging the harm done and promising better governance going forward. I appreciated the gesture, though words couldn't undo the months of stress and isolation. What mattered more was watching the HOA transform from a machine of control into what it should have been all along. Neighbors working together voluntarily, not a miniature government enforcing obedience through fear. The idea for the sign came one evening during my daughter's visit. We were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset bleed orange and purple across the sky, when she said, "You know, the road really should have a name. It's been here 72 years, and everyone just calls it the access road or the old path. It deserves better than that." I thought about it for a long moment. She was right. The road had a history older than the development, older than the HOA, older than all the noise that had come after. It had been carved through these woods by my grandfather with borrowed machinery and determination. It had carried 3 generations of my family. It deserved to be remembered. I spent a week in my workshop building the sign. Nothing fancy, just a piece of steel plate welded to a post, with letters I cut myself, Granger's Path, since 1952. Simple, honest, true. My daughter drove down to help install it. We picked a spot at the entrance to my property, visible from both directions, where anyone passing would see it. She held the post steady while I set it in concrete. We worked in that easy silence that comes from years of understanding each other without needing many words. When it was done, we stepped back to look at it. The late afternoon light caught the steel, making the letters gleam. It wasn't a monument. It wasn't even about pride. It was a marker, a statement that this place had a name, a history, and that both mattered. My daughter put an arm around my shoulders. "Grandpa would be proud," she said. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He built this road so his family could get home. Now that road had his name, and everyone who traveled it would know someone had cared enough to make it permanent. As we walked back toward the house, she asked the question I'd been expecting. "Do you regret any of it? Fighting instead of just paying the fees and moving on?" I thought carefully before answering. The months of stress had taken their toll. The isolation had stung. The legal costs had piled up. But none of that changed the principle. Someone had tried to take what wasn't theirs, disguising greed as governance, counting on me to be too tired or too old to resist. If I'd let that stand, I would have lost more than land. I would have lost my self-respect, my family's legacy, the very idea that what's right is worth defending. "No regrets," I said. "Not one." She smiled. "You know, I learned more watching you through this than I did in 4 years of law school. Sometimes justice isn't about clever arguments or precedents. It's about courage and the patience to prove you're right." I told her she'd done most of the proving. She shook her head. "You did the hard part. You stood your ground when everything was pushing you to give up. That's the part no one can teach." That evening, a neighbor I'd known for years drove by, stopped, and walked up the path. "I owe you an apology, Fletcher," he said. "I believe what I was told at that meeting. I should have asked you directly instead of assuming." I told him we all make mistakes when we only hear one side of a story. What matters is what we do when we learn the truth. He nodded, said thank you, and mentioned that several people were talking about new oversight rules to prevent another abuse of power. That made me hopeful, not because it meant it could never happen again, but because people were finally thinking about how to stop it. As the light faded, I sat on the porch and looked out at the road I'd fought to keep, the bridge I'd built, and the sign that would outlast me. This land had been in my family 72 years. One day it would belong to my daughter, and maybe her children after that. Each generation would add its own story, its own bridges, its own battles. But they'd do it knowing that once, when it mattered, someone had stood his ground and proved that paper authority means nothing without real legitimacy behind it. The land remembers. And the people who protect it, who fight when fighting is required and nurture it when peace returns, become part of that memory. My grandfather knew that truth. Now I did too. And someday, my daughter would pass it on again. That's how dignity survives. That's how justice endures. Not through grand gestures or speeches, but through the quiet insistence that what's right is worth defending.